Our next author, Linda Villarosa, is a journalism professor at the City University of New York and a contributing writer at the New York Times Magazine, where she covers the intersection of race and health. She has also served as executive editor at Essence and as a science writer at the New York Times. Her article on maternal and infant mortality was a finalist for the National Magazine Award. She is also a contributor to the 1619 Project. Linda, thank you so much for being here with us today. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss my book, Under the Skin. I had never heard of the freshman experience or a common read book until my freshman in college son came home to describe the experience of reading the book Citizen by Claudia Rankine at his freshman orientation. He's much more artistic than he is a reader, so I was excited by how invigorated he was by that collaborative discussion among the freshmen. And I often think, and I often thought, that's what I want my book to do. As an educator myself, I consider carefully what will engage my students, whether I'm teaching Black studies, journalism, English, or medical classes. And because of that experience, I thought deeply about how to engage and invigorate my students the same way my son was feeling so on fire. And I thought of that when I was conceiving and writing my book, Under the Skin. The big idea of the book is that though the United States has the most technically advanced and expensive healthcare in the world, we also have much poorer health outcomes. It starts with birth and ends with death, which means we have high infant mortality rates, worse than other developed countries, and life expectancy is shorter than other wealthy nations. But too often, these poor health outcomes are treated as a mystery, though the answers are hiding in plain sight. The premise of my book is that inequality, particularly the health disparities of people of color, specifically Black people, are driving down the health and well-being of our nation as a whole and compared to other countries. It has taken me years of reporting, first at Essence magazine, where I was the health editor, later at the New York Times, where I was an assistant science editor in charge of health coverage for the paper, and now as a contributing writer to the New York Times magazine to figure out what was going on. My book takes the reader through my own journey, including the ways my thinking shifted. I include my personal experience of witnessing medical discrimination and ill treatment of my own family members. And as in my magazine stories, I use personal narratives to illustrate and illuminate data, evidence, research, and deep reporting. The main point of the book is that it isn't race in itself, or that something is genetically inferior about the Black body or wrong with Black culture, as is commonly thought, that creates medical inequality and racial health disparities. It is actually racism, not race, that being Black makes us subject to ill treatment, discrimination, harms our bodies, and causes us to live sicker and die quicker than other Americans, and drives down our nation's health status, especially compared to other rich countries. I have to admit something to you. My book was late. I missed the deadline by about 1.5 years, which is really terrible for a journalist. It is being released on Tuesday with an excerpt in the New York Times magazine this weekend and a really wonderful review that comes out a week from Sunday, not at the beginning of 2021 when it was scheduled. In the middle of working on Under the Skin, I was invited to contribute to the 1619 Project. That made me realize that some of the experiences of discrimination and harm that Black Americans have endured were rooted in slavery. Even though they happened centuries ago, they have a through line to today. And I realized I had to include that thinking in my book. And then the pandemic happened, and I needed to include that. I was dispatched to cover how the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected African Americans for a New York Times magazine cover story. So to the book, I added the ways that the pandemic unearthed and confirmed the racial health disparities I had been writing about and reporting on, and that became the last chapter of my book. So finally, though Under the Skin looks at some difficult realities and hard truths, I also include hope and promise that things will change. I point to the activism and energy of students, particularly med students, public health students, and pre-med students, who are the future healthcare providers and policymakers, because they care deeply about social justice and want to create a different kind of medical system. I sincerely hope that students of all kinds will use my book as a source of information, guidance, understanding, and encouragement to create a better world. Thank you.